So if you're considering selling, well, you may be wondering just how much would you lose if you sold your property as is versus doing some improvements. Well, we'll take a look at the best ways to sell as is, the pros and cons of selling your home as is, and as well as a bonus, I'll reveal my house hack formula that will tell you just how much money you will leave on the table versus how much more money you can make. So be sure to stay tuned to the end. I'm Harold Powell, a local real estate agent serving Ventura and the surrounding communities. So if you like my videos and want to stay up to date on all things real estate for Ventura and the surrounding area, well, I suggest hitting the subscribe, like, and bell icon to be notified of future content. All right, first off, let's address the subject of selling as is. On a typical home sale in California, the property is sold as is, subject to a buyer's inspection, which means the seller is not obligated to make any repairs other than the city or state mandated items that are agreed to in the purchase contract. Now, it also means that after the inspections are done, the buyer can ask the seller to do the repairs or ask for a closing cost credit in lieu of repairs. So it really becomes another round of negotiations that can happen that will either result with the buyer and seller moving forward or canceling the contract. Now, I would recommend watching my video on negotiating requests for repairs that really take a deeper dive into that process. Otherwise, let's look at the 3 pros and cons of selling as is. Let's start with the pros. Number 1 is it will save you time. It can take 2 to 4 weeks and possibly longer to get a house ready for sale depending on what needs to be done. And if you need to quickly sell for financial reasons or other circumstances, well, then selling it as is may be a practical solution if there are time constraints. Number 2 is convenience. Selling as is avoids all the work and hassle of fixing up the property. And the 2 most frequent scenarios where I see this more frequently are with property that's inherited or even a rental property. An example would be, let's say, a property that was in probate or a trust sale, or an out-of-area family member inherits a property with a mortgage. And being out of the area, the convenience of doing minimal fix-ups and opting for a quicker sale is very appealing. And second is a tenant-occupied rental. Rather than further disrupt the tenant, the sellers opt to sell as is while a tenant continues to occupy the property. The other convenience option is once escrow is open, a seller can also opt to give a buyer a credit in lieu of repairs, which makes it much easier than coordinating repairs, especially for a tenant-occupied property. Number 3 is just avoiding out-of-pocket costs or selling expenses. Selling your home as is avoids the out-of-pocket expense that may be a practical choice for some that can't afford to pay for repairs or improvements up front prior to listing the home on the market. Now, there are some contractors that we will work with that will defer payment until the property closes escrow. And so we always look to see if there are ways to help the seller increase the value of their property. Now, some repairs may need to be done in order to satisfy, let's say, lending requirements or financing requirements, such as a smoke and carbon detector and water heater strapping. So oftentimes there are some practical solutions that can be taken to avoid a complete overhaul and drastically reduce a seller's out-of-pocket expense. So for more on that, I suggest watching my video on what not to fix before selling. Otherwise, opting for a buying closing cost credit in lieu of home inspection repairs may also be the best way to eliminate potential out-of-pocket expense. All right, so let's look at the 3 cons of selling as is. Number 1 con, fewer retail buyers. There are several reasons selling it as is reduces the number of buyers. One is it requires the buyers to have additional funds to come out of their pocket for repairs and fix-ups. And a fair number of buyers have just saved just enough for the down payment and closing costs, but additional costly repairs or updates can prevent them from buying a property in an as-is state. Number 2 is that if you're labeling your house as is, Many buyers don't want to deal with the headache and the time of making repairs. Additionally, they don't want to deal with the unknown cost of not even knowing how much it's going to cost them to make repairs. So the last reason it can potentially reduce the number of potential buyers is that you really are putting a red flag above the house saying there is some things wrong with the house and you don't want to fix it. So in order for the buyer to really be able to know what they're buying as is, they're really going to need to have estimates of repairs that you'll need to disclose to the buyer before receiving offers from buyers. And a good example of this was a property that we sold as is with a complete repair estimate prior to accepting an offer. The seller, actually in this case, lived out of state and opted to sell as is instead of going through a lengthy repair process that would have run 9 to 10 months. In addition to the cost, the after rehab value, or ARV, was around $915,000 to $925,000. And we priced the home at $609,000 and gave the buyers a copy of the contractor's itemized estimate so they would fully understand what the deficiencies were up front and be able to make a non-contingent or as-is offer. Not surprising, we had several all-cash offers from investors ranging from $570,000 to $615,000. But we did have an all-cash retail buyer that offered $650,000 as is for the property. And the key is that we had the full reports for the buyers to evaluate the condition before submitting the offer. Now, you may wonder, well, what about all of the ads I see from investors wanting to buy my house as is? Well, the truth is the owner-occupied retail buyer will definitely pay more for the property than an investor. They will actually pay more than an investor would because the buyers buying a home to live in are emotionally invested in the property, which increases the value of the property in the eyes of the buyer. Now, on the other hand, the investor or the flipper is purely looking at the number side of things. They are looking to buy low enough to either rent it out for cash flow or to flip it to turn a profit when selling it. So this brings us to number two. Number two is below market offers. Many of the ads you see from investors willing to buy your house cash comes at a price, and typically they'll be anywhere from 10 to 20% or more below what a retail buyer is willing to pay. And the price discount will largely depend on the condition and the amount of work to be done. So the greater the amount of work to be done, well, the greater the percentage that the property will attract below market offers from investors at a significant discount. Or another way to saying it is that the greater the list of repairs, the fewer number of retail buyers that will consider it. Now, at the same time, minor repair items that run maybe just a couple $1,000s typically won't scare your retail buyer off so much. Number three on the list is selling your home as is can restrict financing on the property. Some loans, such as VA or FHA loans, have health and safety requirements that are much more restrictive than a conventional loan. So if a property doesn't meet these requirements and a buyer is planning on using an FHA or VA loan, well, they won't be eligible to purchase the property. So this in turn reduces the amount of emotionally invested retail offers that are willing to pay top dollar for the property. Now, quick side note on all of this is just because a seller decides to sell a property as is does not mean the seller doesn't have to disclose what they know is wrong with the property. It's imperative that the seller disclose known defects or facts that can affect the value of the property. Always disclose, disclose, disclose. All right, so let's get back to my house hack formula that you can use to determine how much money you will make or be leaving on the table. It will also help to determine which updates are worth doing and which may not make sense at all. This may require the help of your local real estate agent to take a look at this with you. Step number one is to get a comparative market analysis on your specific area and compare homes on the market in similar conditions and similar features, ideally with the same number of bedrooms, baths, and similar square footage to the subject property to give you the estimate of value in its current condition. Step number two, we're going to find properties that have been fixed up to come up with a after rehab value, also known as ARV estimate. Now, this is a very common term among house flippers to determine the potential profit. So the goal is to determine if we could achieve a similar look without over improving the property or overspending, which is the key. Number 3 is get your estimates for the areas of improvements and potential repairs. For the improvements such as paint, flooring, light, and plumbing fixtures, so you may want to prioritize which items will have the greatest impact on the value, especially if you are on a budget. On the repair side, items such as furnaces or older roofs may be better off to offer a prorated credit. So an example could be on a roof that is toward the end of its useful life. Rather than pay for the full amount of a brand new roof, you can often negotiate that as a prorated credit for the roof, since the buyer wasn't expecting to get a brand new roof when purchasing the property. Otherwise, keep in mind, some repair costs such as termite work can be paid through the sale of the property rather than an out-of-pocket expense. Sometimes if there are a lot of additional repairs to account for, then either getting a home inspection with a repair estimator or even a contractor to estimate the repairs needed can give us a pretty good idea as to what a seller and buyer may need to be aware of in order to create transparency up front when purchasing the property as is. Step 4 is the formula. So now the formula is to take the as-is price plus improvements and then subtract that from the ARV, after rehab value, to determine how much money you would either lose by selling it as is, or actually in this case, maybe potentially make more money. This number should be a positive number, meaning the ARV number is higher than the as-is plus improvement number. And if it's not, well, it's telling you you shouldn't do certain improvements or need to consider less expensive improvement options if you are going to fix the property up. Now, a classic example from that would be to paint tired kitchen cabinets and put new hardware on for maybe about $2,000 versus putting all new cabinets in for $35,000 to $50,000. This can absolutely ruin your budget and the cost of what it's going to cost you to do this. So this is definitely where I'd recommend using the expertise of an agent so you can avoid overspending. So let's take a look at a specific example of a property that some clients inherited that we sold using this formula. The property is that we'll take a look at is in original condition, 1,100 square foot entry level 3-bedroom 2-bath home that had very little done to it over the years. The as-is value at the time, without doing anything, was about $670,000. And you can see here from the photos that the condition of the property was pretty tired. We obtained improvement estimates for painting the entire inside, including the kitchen cabinets, except for just one bedroom, and added some hardware to the cabinets, removed the dated curtains, updated the flooring throughout, changed the bathroom vanity, and updated the bathroom lighting. And the seller spent about $13,500 towards these improvements. Now, the seller chose not to replace the stove or oven, since that would have required changing out the countertop as well. But they did offer a $500 credit for the oven that was not working. Now, after the improvements, the property looked significantly better, especially when you look at them before and after side by side here. So we put the property on the market for $709,000 and ended up with multiple offers and selling it to an FHA buyer for $745,000. Now, I will say that the property would not have sold FHA in the as-is condition. But because of the improvements, we could sell it to an FHA buyer. Now, going back to the formula, we take the as-is price of $670,000 plus $13,500 for improvements, which equals $683,500. Then take the sale price of $745,000 minus the $683,500 equals the profit, or how much you would lose if you chose to sell as is in this case, which is $61,500. So the moral of the story is you don't have to do a complete overhaul to improve the rate of return. I hope you enjoyed today's video and found it helpful. If so, give it a like. Thanks.